advice do you have to homeowners?
Practicing that preparedness. Starting the conversation now is always going to be a benefit to any association out there.
And welcome to Recovery Report Live. I'm Dan Odess, president of GlobalPro, where we manage risk to recovery, and we have managed more than $1 billion in recovery in the placement of thousands of insurance policies for community associations and business owners. And we want to make sure you have the information you can use. That's what this show is all about. So thank you for joining us today, Thursday, 11 o'clock, every single week. Today's show is full of information that you can use, and I'm looking forward to inviting our guest on to talk about important insurance information, important issues for community associations as it relates to insurance. But before I get there, I want to talk about the evolving situation, obviously from Hurricane Ida and its remnants as it rolls up the East Coast. You know, thinking back, looking back 10 years, where we started, 2012, scary storm right there at the end of the year. Most of us that have been impacted by the remnants of Ida are thinking about Hurricane Sandy. This is just like one of those little nightmares that won't go away. We're hearing a lot from our clientele. We're hearing a lot about the same issues. People asking us about what's covered. How do I make a claim? You know, what do I do about this issue? What do I do first? How do I mitigate these things? You know, there is a process by which you need to follow. You need to make sure you're doing the same thing. And unfortunately, it's an evolving situation, right? You got to do what you can. Resources are limited. Construction costs are already at an all-time high. Labor materials are both already scarce. Let's be honest, right? So make sure that you're documenting things, taking lots of pictures before, during, and after all of your efforts. I hope you were taking pictures and videos last night when you're hearing the water come into the basement areas or the low levels of your properties, whether it was a business or a community association or even your own home. Make sure you're documenting these things as you're arriving to the property and as the contractors or the people that are helping you, get the water out and pump it and clean. Make sure you're taking photographs, if not videos. Spare yourself the time of narrating it. Just simply take it. Just walk around. You don't know what you're looking at just yet as it relates to damage, so you certainly don't want to prejudice yourself. As you're reporting those claims, make sure it's timely. Take your time in doing those things. Walk through the process. But there's some things that we learned from Superstorm Sandy that we want to make sure we don't make those same mistakes, right? First off, the individuals that go out there on behalf of the insurance company do not represent your interests. Don't mistake yourself. Don't be mistaken. One of the things that we saw after Superstorm Sandy was we saw an engineering firm working with a insurance adjusting firm and helping deny claims, helping exclude coverages. And it was this fraud scheme that unfolded in front of us. Some of our clients were caught up in it. We went in, investigated. It was very strange. We had engineering reports for other properties which documented flood damages or hurricane damages, and they were basically manipulating and rewriting the reports to obtain these sort of the results they were looking for, the results that their managers wanted. And obviously there was a whistleblower that said, hey, that's not my report. That's not what I wrote. So again, don't assume that these individuals going on behalf of the insurance company are there to help you. They're there to document things on behalf of the insurance company. So if you don't know something, you don't know something. Don't make assumptions about what's going on. Just like I made a comment about making the video. Spare yourself the time and the efforts of trying to narrate what you're seeing or what you're looking at. Just simply document things, right? That's what we want to do. Make a record of things that are going on. All right, it's really, really important. If you can't tell the difference between maybe wind damage that was caused to your house and the flooding that was happening, it's going to require some sort of expert or some sort of consultant to help shore up your claim so you can prove your damages. There may have been a tree that fell onto your property that caused a huge opening and water poured in. And the insurance company may try to claim that some sort of flooding or some flood contributed or caused the issue, which may cloud the issues of payments and where it's coming from and the types of coverages you may be looking for. These are all important issues that us, either as homeowners or as business owner community associations, are going to be contending with. So be careful as to what you're doing there. And if you see a confusing issue, reach out to us, reach out to experts. Make sure that you have the information to prove the issues of causation, distinguish between what was caused by, let's say, a falling tree or wind versus flooding. This is also important information for anyone that was impacted in the Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana areas. There's going to be a lot of confusion over flood versus wind. It's going to come up. I haven't heard much about it yet, but it's coming. It is going to be a central issue with regards to a lot of claims that we see from the Louisiana, Mississippi, and the other Gulf Coast areas that were impacted by Hurricane Ida, not the remnants that we're seeing up in the Northeast area. But again, our hearts and prayers are with everyone else. We want to make sure we're recovering, make sure that we're rebuilding our communities, make sure that we're working together. And that brings me to the last point, which is community comes first. We want to make sure that all those that were not impacted by these huge disaster are doing what they can to help, because without the involvement of community, without giving, without the charitable giving that we would once expect from other communities for our communities that have suffered, we are not going to rebound. All you have to do is go to areas in the Panhandle that just did not get the charitable giving and donations that other parts typically do in the denser, more populated areas, right? There's seems to be a lot more giving that goes on for those areas than, let's say, some of these rural areas or less densely populated urban central areas, right? But without those donations, the recovery takes longer, it's harder. The federal government's only going to give so much money. Private insurance is only going to cover what they are required to cover. And even when they're required to cover, they may still not cover it. So we need the charitable giving. We're doing our part. We're working with local organizations. We're coordinating efforts already. We started doing it before the storm even rolled on shore because we could see it already coming. We've had the experience of being on the front lines and seeing this stuff happen. So community comes first. Make sure you're doing what you can, and GlobalPro Cares is going to be doing its part in doing that giving. And we'll make sure that we include some links on our website, social media, and other places so that you have information about credible organizations where you can give, you can help these communities. And there's a lot of them that have been impacted by Hurricane Ida and the remnants as they continue to go up the East Coast here. So make sure that you're tracking these things, you're doing your part, that if you weren't affected, even if you're in the local area and you're not affected, look to see what you can do. I mean, maybe it's just going out and just helping people clean up, or local organizations, band together to do these things. It's really, really important to do those things. So, but don't want to get off too much on a tangent on those things. I wanted to talk a little bit about, obviously, it's top of mind and an issue, and someone that's just located, our next guest, I'm really excited to bring them on because this gentleman is located in the area. He has been impacted by these storms in the Northeast, so he is living and breathing and doing it, but I'm so glad that he was able to take the time to be able to join us today. So I want to go ahead and introduce our next guest, Mr. Brian Boak of Akam Associates. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining us today.
How you doing today?
We're doing good. We're doing good. So glad to have you on here. I want to talk a little bit about Acam first. Talk about Akam Associates. It offers a variety of services for residential properties, from residential management services, commercial management, leasing, new development consulting, management, and apartment management and sales and brokerage. Brian is an integral part of the risk management services that they are providing there. He leads that group. So Brian, again, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a challenging time. I was, in reference to Ida, I was up until about 2 o'clock this morning, trying to keep my house dry. We got a little bit of water, but nothing catastrophic, as many of our other buildings and my friends have gotten. So I feel lucky. No,
that's awesome, man, Brian. And also, we obviously appreciate the effort of you coming onto the show, given your lack of sleep and your evening activities that I'm sure were not planned. But it's awesome. So tell us a little bit about Acam. I mentioned there are a whole long list of services that you guys provide. But in your words, what are the types of clients? What's the focus of Akam Associates?
So the focus of Akam Associates is a property manager for high-end condo and co-op buildings. Currently, we have buildings in the tri-state area in South Florida. We are growing dramatically. We've probably put on 20 or 30 properties this year, and that's because the value-added services that Acam can provide to their buildings.
That's awesome, and definitely strong growth. Those numbers are incredible. So, if you don't know much about management, bringing on 20, 30 buildings is a lot of personalities. It's a lot to deal with, and getting to know those properties all at once is a heck of a task. And I've got an opportunity to meet with you. I've been to your offices in New York on a prior occasion. You talk about how did you get started at Acam, and a bit about your role in the risk management services.
So I got started because and was growing and wanted to provide more value to their boards and want some to be able to explain insurance and help the boards understand insurance to get the best value so they understand. So Acam has in excess of 300 properties in multiple states. I am the person that's able to translate insurance into English for boards and property managers. I explain insurance renewals, I explain coverage, I assist with claims, anything in regards to insurance. I am able to provide valuable, unbiased insurance information to the boards when they think, because everybody thinks that the insurance agent is just trying to sell you coverage so he can make more money. And in reality, they're just trying to protect you. But everybody's jaded. So I provide that biased opinion.
Yeah, and I've seen that firsthand. We worked recently where we had a client in common, and Brian was able to just dissect these policies, give valuable information, had a real good pulse on the market as to what's going on and what he's seeing at other properties. So having someone like this on staff for all these properties that Acam is managing is tremendous. Not all community association management companies have it, particularly someone with the decades of experience that Brian has. So I definitely see a huge advantage to having someone like Brian there helping associations kind of sort through the different coverages and things that they need. Let's jump right into the topic then, Brian. So it's managing the risk of insuring a condo association, which we all know is very complicated and difficult if you're in that arena, if you're in the community association world, particularly in light of Ida and all the devastation it's causing, and I'm sure the many associations that have been impacted by it. I want to talk about understanding what insurance is supposed to do for you is a good idea to understand a little bit about its foundation. What is it built on? And so the first question that I have in mind is talking about building replacement costs, something I know Brian and I spoke about this a little bit, a very confusing topic. Brian, I guess in your own words, how is it determined, and what are you seeing as it relates in today's current market? What are some of the issues with building replacement costs as the cost of construction is out of control? The value of properties is skyrocketing in some of the markets. So how is it determined?
Right. So I'm going to go over your last point first. You mentioned value of properties and replacement costs, and those are two completely different items, because the insurance company is not insuring how much you could sell your building for. It's insuring how much you would cost to replace the building in like, kind, and quality items. So if you have an historic building, it's going to be more expensive because get that detail. So insurance brokers use a few different programs. One of them is called Marshall & Swift Replacement Cost Estimator. The insurance companies use a variety of different of their own proprietary programs depending on how deep they want to delve into it. Buildings themselves, if they're not sure, they can actually hire an appraiser to determine the correct replacement cost. And one of the parts on the policy that's important to have is a little bit of extra coverage for replacement cost, because let's say a catastrophic event happens and building costs have spiked. You want to make sure that you have a little bit of a buffer. So several companies will put on, say, an extra 25% on top. So if you have a $10 million building, they'll add another, or $100 million building, depending on the building, they'll add another 25% on if it goes that far.
Yeah. So I'm glad you touched on it, because we field the question. So I mean, like, look, man, I'm seeing the value of my condo or the townhome that's in the community association has tripled. Do I have enough insurance? And there's been this reaction going, yeah, your insurance hasn't changed, man. It's really nothing to do with that. That's a little bit of a disconnect, but again, it's a little bit of the novice, misunderstanding of these things. And again, we're talking about foundation here, where we're talking about, making sure that you have enough insurance first before you start talking about what's covered by it. And that's really what's important there. So how often and I get this question quite a bit, how often do associations need to appraise their building in order to make sure that they have the right values?
In general, the insurance company will look at it every couple of years to increase the coverage. It really depends on where the building is located and type of construction. But you can always ask your broker, please do a replacement cost estimator to make sure I have the right coverage. And if you think that number is low, then hire an appraiser. I wouldn't think the soonest you'd have to do it is if insurance company has done your normal replacement cost increases every 5 to 10 years, because as long as it's going up and you have some replacement cost, you should be okay. But might want to look at it carefully every, say, 5 or on the outside 10 years.
And you mentioned the word carefully, making sure that it's actually an appraisal of your building is really important. And reviewing those documents and checking them for accuracy is always really important. And if you have any questions about that and things like that, reaching out to experts such as Brian, myself, to look at that. One instance we had is where they had way more glass, in the appraisals than actually was on the property. And what we found out is that the appraiser only went into part of the building, and he went in the part of the building that had more glass on it, and then he just extrapolated, and next thing you know, they had the wrong amount of glass coverage. Things like that just can happen. So check it for accuracy. Be careful about it. Using Brian's words there, definitely check it carefully and make sure that everything's there and doing it. One of the other things, obviously, in the wake of the Champlain South Tower, there's it's in the news. It's not going away. There's a lot of talk about the sale of the property, mostly now in a memorial, to memorialize that tragedy. Certainly don't want to forget that is an absolutely sad, crazy occurrence that, just trying to wrap your head around it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But we need board members, right? Your association needs board members, and those board members need protections. There's a lot of discussion. There was early on about, I don't want to be a board member anymore because of the Champlain South Tower. I don't want to be responsible for this. And there was a lot of unit owners that were very frustrated and going to the press directly rather than to the board. And D&O insurance is a hot topic. So in light of Champlain South Tower, how important is D&O insurance, and how much is enough?
So D&O, directors and officers insurance, protects the board for decisions that they make. How much is enough? That's a tough question. Now, luckily, most of our umbrella liability policies provide excess D&O coverage. Not all of them, but most of them do. So you normally have a $1 million D&O policy, and most times the umbrella liability, excess liability policy provides excess D&O. So if you have a $50 million, $100 million, $100 million umbrella, you would have that limit plus the $1 million of D&O. So if you don't have it, it really boils down to what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel comfortable. Is it 3 million? Is it 5 million? Separate D&O can get expensive, so I don't boards, if they don't have coverage on D&O policy, purchasing more than 5 million, because it does get pricey. But it really just depends on what makes you comfortable, and so you can have it on your umbrella policy, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, and I've been heard recently there's a trend towards getting certain coverages for like legal expenses and stuff like that, and a lawyer and things you can layer on those. So, some other things to think about. You brought up umbrella liability, which is kind of like the next segue, right? We talk a lot about D&O, you talk a lot about umbrella liabilities together. Kind of the same question: how much is enough? And what are some of the issues, I guess? What are some of the pitfalls that you're seeing when people are considering umbrella liability? What are the questions that they're asking?
How much is enough? I've been in the insurance industry for 30 plus years, and that was probably the first question that was asked to me, and it was asked to me yesterday. So it doesn't go away. And umbrella liability is truly sleep at night insurance. What makes you feel comfortable in case there is a lawsuit? And the true answer is $1 more than the judgment against you. That's what it is. Most of our New York buildings have a ballpark of 100 million. If over 50 units, buildings under 50 units generally have smaller amounts because there's less people to spread that cost over. We know other states, for example, Florida, have traditionally had much lower umbrella liability limits, which we're working on. So it really depends on where you are. New York is litigious central.
Yes,
So
yes.
That's like, how coverage should I go? How can I afford?
Yes,
How much?
yes.
How much am I willing to spend?
Well, that was a great sound bite. The sleep at night insurance. I'm gonna take that and use that on my own because that's fantastic. It really does illustrate. I mean, it really is that, right? You want to buy it and stick it under your mattress and kind of forget about it, but you know that you have it at night, right? It's and it definitely helps you rest easy, particularly for a lot of these board members that are really feeling the heat since Champlain South Tower, particularly in the South Florida market. But just because it happened in South Florida doesn't mean it can't happen in the coastal areas in New Jersey, New York, or really much anywhere, particularly with the amount of density. We thought some urban cores were dense now, but they're getting even more dense. They're building, narrower buildings taller, right? So they're more density, more units. They're packing more into these areas. So it's always really, really important to have that stuff. So it's just incredibly. And so, one of the things that we're seeing again with Champlain South Tower is issues regarding construction and professionals and things like that. A really important topic and an area in which we're seeing a lot of interest in our own services as it relates to contractor claims. Contractors that associations are hiring to come onto the property to do work, or contractors that are doing construction nearby. We're doing a lot with construction right now. It's definitely a hot area, hot topic. It kind of goes along with that whole urban density, the increase in density that we're seeing in the urban core. There's many different ways to protect an association, and one of that we want to talk about is alteration agreements and the contract review process. Who's doing it? What is it? What should they be looking for as far as mitigation of risk and protecting the association?
So an alteration agreement is a legal document between a unit owner and the building saying, I want to make changes to my unit. This is what I'm going to make. And kind of a guideline on what needs to be done, what information needs to be gathered, who's responsible, hold harmless agreements, all of that type of work. It's technically a legal document, so a lawyer, right? But in reality, your property management firm deals with a lot of buildings. So a lot of times they gather alteration agreements, and something that we've done is we've gathered a lot of alteration agreements and kind of worked out and found the best parts of all of them to create a sample alteration agreement. No, it's not an alteration agreement for them to use. It's like, this is an example of a really good one looks like. Take the pieces out that you want, use what you want, but here is a base for you to work with for your building, because every building is different and there's different levels of alteration. Are they painting? Are they putting floors down? Are they gutting the entire unit? What is being done? In reference to contract review, all of your contractors' contracts and insurance policies should be reviewed by the insurance broker. That person is the expert in tearing these apart. They usually have someone at their office that is just a contract expert, because we've run into situations where the policy will have a height exclusion. So you got somebody doing side work, but they can't work on over a 9-story building, but yours is 12. Which means which means you have no coverage. Or ran into one event where the contractor was going to do like landscaping work, like a penthouse patio, landscaping work. Well, there was an exclusion on their policy for doing roofing and stonework. It's like, that's what they were doing.
Yes.
And we've caught other ones where they were going to do one thing, but they were only for like painting. So it's really, there's a lot of exclusions on policies that, and this is going to lead into the next part, certificates of insurance.
Right.
Okay. Being named, you want your building, you want your board, you want your property manager to be able to be named as additional insurers on the certificate of insurance. Unfortunately, many times the contractor's insurance policy will say, You are only considered an additional insured if required by contract. So if there is not a contract between two parties that say X, Y, and Z have to be named as additional insured, what it says on the certificate is worthless. And most people don't know that. That's why the certificate of insurance is a starting point of the review. It is not an ending point.
Right, right. And
Just because you got somebody with 10 million of liability and everybody's named as additional insured, doesn't mean you're covered.
Right, exactly. And those limits could run up and be used up quickly if there's a number of unit owners impacted all at one time, things like that. So, and then you brought
or other projects.
Right, exactly. And you mentioned the issues regarding, the guy that has worked at 9 stories but working on a 12-story building. And a lot of that stuff you can't even pick up in the certificate of insurance, right? So you have to have questions.
None of that's on the certificate.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So you have to ask the right questions, know how to understand these things, review these things. It's very technical, and it's very important, extremely important, because effectively you have an uninsured contractor on your property that you're never going to see a recovery from. So you've basically self-insured the work they're going to be completed. And then we go back to D&O and E&O and potential claims against your management and other things. So it just runs downhill, if you will. So you want to make sure that you're looking at these things. I think you've picked up really, really important information out there. And last thing I want to hit on before we end here today, Brian, it's been a great conversation with you. Because of Ida and because of the things that are going on in the Northeast, let's talk a little real quickly, just a couple little points if we can pull them out of you here, on flood claims when it relates to associations. What's covered and how should they be reporting those claims?
So flood claims, there's 2 different type of things that people call flood claims. Sometimes people say, the pipe broke in the basement, my basement's flooded, I have to put in a flood claim. And in reality, that's not a flood claim. Yep. That's a broken pipe claim. A flood claim is rising groundwater in normally dry areas. That's a flood claim. So, for example, the flood claims that we see coming in today are flooded basements, flooded boilers. I have a lot of different friends. They're flooded houses, they're flooded breweries, they're all different types of things when an unusual amount of water happens. So, but flood claims, rising groundwater, you want to make sure that you have flood coverage. Normally there's a larger deductible for a flood claim. Okay. Flood is not covered on every policy. Flood and earthquake are specialty coverages. So you want to make sure that you do have that coverage and what type of coverage you have. There is the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, which is one part. Some insurance companies will put limited flood coverage on their buildings policy, on the property policy. So there's a variety of different ways to cover flood damage.
No, I think it's all great points. I mean, as you can see, our audience can see, a person like Brian on a team, on your management team, helping you navigate this process is so important, particularly in today's landscape when it comes to the complexity of insurance and obtaining coverages and making sure that you're actually protected, like the example he gave between the 9-story contractor working on a 12-story building. These are all such important issues. Someone only with the experience like Brian has can do these things and help you navigate these things. Don't just think that your manager's going to be able to figure this out working with your broker. That's not how it works, right? You need someone actually analyzing these things, looking at the issues as far as really just mitigating your downside, right? You want to protect your downside, and you want to make sure that you're protecting the financial stability of your association, particularly in today's world where, you're not sure who the owners are. There's a lot of tenants coming into a lot of these buildings. You have the whole, we're seasonal in the South Florida market. We went from seasonal to now full-time people living here full-time as opposed to as much seasonal as we used to see. Things are changing. So you need someone on your team that's going to help you, that's going to help you navigate this difficult part. So how can our audience find out more about Acam and your services and to potentially even hire you guys for their new and upcoming building?
The easiest way to find out more about Acam is just go to our website, which is www.acam.com. That will find out most. If they want to talk to me directly, my email is my first initial and last name. So it's BBOAK at acam.com. And I can put you in touch with the right people in reference to helping you out.
Well, it's awesome, Brian. Thanks so much for joining us. And Brian is with Akam Associates. Go check him out online. Really simple domain name, as he's mentioned there, acam.com, akam.com. Definitely encourage you all to speak with Brian, find out about his services. I think insurance is definitely such an important issue. It's typically that line item in your budget that gets little attention during the audit process, but during renewals, it's definitely like a little bit of a shock with where rates are going. So you want to make sure you have all the information you need, and the way to do that is to contacting someone like Brian that can help you navigate that process. So again, Brian, thanks so much for joining us here today on the Recovery Report.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day. Be safe.
Good luck with the recovery, Brian. So thanks, guys. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our audience. Thank you to Brian and Acam for taking the time to join us here on the Recovery Report. It was a great show full of a lot of information that you can actually use at community association. It's incredible that Brian was able to take the time to help us. I know he's dealing with an influx of phone calls right now. He's dealing with his own situation in his own basement. You know, we obviously, our hearts and prayers go out to everyone that's been impacted by Ida and that's dealing with the recovery efforts. Again, community comes first. Make sure you're doing what you can to help our community rebound. We're going to be putting out information about the credible charitable organizations that are going to be helping people in different markets throughout the country recover from these disasters. But they're not the only disasters that are impacting us in this country. We have fires out west, we have floods and tornadoes that are being constantly reported, and we have Hurricane Larry sitting out there in the Atlantic. You know, who knows where it's going to end up. With all the predictions, as you have seen them, a lot of times this early on, they're wrong. So always stay vigilant in your preparation. Make sure that you're doing what you can for your community association, your business owner, your employees, your staff, your fellow unit owners, to make sure that you're in the best possible situation to recovery. And the best way to make sure that you have the information you can use as it relates to insurance and real estate and development and everything that's going on in your market is to tune in on this show every Thursday at 11 o'clock at the Recovery Report. And we'll be back next week with another guest. We're going to be again talking about important information and issues that you need to know about. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, like us and follow us on all the social media. Thank you so much for Brian and Acam and everyone that joined us today. This was a great show. And we, again, hearts and prayers to all the victims and everyone that's been impacted by Hurricane Ida. Look for information about what you can do to give back. And we'll see you next week on the Recovery Report Live.